So the business tip I'm going to talk about tonight is not something that's a new topic, but it is something that's really important. And the business tip I'm talking about is the power of business planning. But not just business planning, it's about the power of doing quarterly planning. And it's not about the quarterly plan, it is partly about the quarterly plan, but it's also about the timing. And Isaac was just talking about 23 and coming into 2024. The importance of planning now so that when you come back in 2024, you hit the ground running. Whereas a lot of business owners wait until after the 26th of January to actually start making progress. So it's about how do you hit the ground running first. And the reason I'm talking about this, and the whole purpose behind this, is how I've seen many businesses go up a whole nother level without having to be good at everything, and yet, and still doing their very best. And so when we think about planning, if it goes wrong, the old saying, which is, if you plan to fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? If it goes wrong, that's what happens. If it goes wrong, we end up missing out on opportunities, not just business opportunities, but the opportunities to collaborate with people around us because we're not clear about what it is and the reason we're in business. And the results that we get become a bit hit and miss. Now, when planning goes right, what that means is that we set and plot a course for our ideal business. We get really clear on what that looks like. And I recently read a book by Benjamin Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and Dan Sullivan. It's a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And what he talked about was the research behind psychology nowadays is that they're very clear that the clearer you are on your future, that determines what you do in your now. So that means that the likelihood, and they've proven this through research, of us achieving our goals becomes more likely the clearer we are on what our future is. And so when we think about having those areas when it goes right also we get really clear on our purpose, like why we're actually in business. What's the juice in it for us? And we get really clear on what the projects are that we are going to follow in order for us to achieve our goals. Now, I want to tell you a quick story, and the story is about a client I've been working with for 5 years. And I'm going to pause for a second and say, all this planning that I'm talking about for clients, I do for myself as well. And part of the network I'm with, we categorically do our quarterly planning every single year. Now, this client, when I first started with them, they had 3 major problems. One, he'd been in business for 15 years and there was still no cash in the bank. Number 2, he was still on the tools after 15 years being scheduled for jobs. And number 3, their margins were so skinny, he was basically working for nothing year after year. And they were making profit, but it was really minimal for a business that was turning over $2.5 million. So what we did is we worked on, we worked on 3 things. The first thing was we worked on this formula called this formula for success. So the formula for success is be times do equals have. Now what he had was a business that he'd been operating for 15 years that was taking the life out of him and he had no money in the bank. Not so exciting. And the reason he had that was because of what he'd been doing or what the business had been doing, and it was because of who he'd been being. He'd been being the worker in the business. So what we did is we had him focus on being a leader. We upped his communication and we really got him focused on being courageous. Courageous in terms of letting go to allow the team to step up and manage the busyness of the business. So that's the B piece is really important. Now the do bit is where the planning came in. So this is the second part that we did. We categorically put a plan together every single quarter after planning out the 5-year, 3-year, 12 months. We reversed engineered that into a 90-day plan and we did that every single quarter. But we did it so it was in place before the end of the quarter. So we already had clarity on where we were going, what the projects were, and who was accountable for it. So the outcome was this. In 6 months, he was off the tool 100% of the time and has never gone back on the tools again. We put in place a plan and we implemented like crazy. We looked at the areas that he was making money in his business and the areas that he wasn't, and there was quite a few of those. So we stopped doing that and we started focusing on the areas that were making his that was, building his business and giving him a whole lot more profit. So much so that last week he came back from spending 5 weeks in the US for his 50th birthday. And when we reflected on what happened the previous year, he'd had more holidays out of his, in the entire time that he'd ever been in business. So he's a pretty happy guy. Excuse me. So the importance of planning and doing it now. Can I ask a question? Who's got a plan in place already for the next quarter in 2024? So I'm going to leave this with you, a conclusion, right? The conclusion is this. Make planning a priority. I promise you it makes the biggest difference in the world. I had another client that phoned me and she goes, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't listen to you for the first 8 months of our coaching. This planning thing's really working. And my husband's has shifted significantly. And they did, their biggest month ever last month. So number one, be committed to having a life and a business that is better than now. Because when you get to the end of the 12 months, you want to look back and go, wow, that was an extraordinary ride. I either achieved these goals or I didn't, or I had these experiences, or I got whatever those learnings were. But get committed, because there's a reason that we're here or we go to networking events. It's to be able to connect and be able to build our businesses. So be committed to making that happen. And the third and last point is be brave. Be brave and be courageous. So in closing, I want you to think about, maybe it was something you heard from me or somebody that you've already spoken to tonight. Or maybe it was something that I said that triggered a thought in your mind. But make a mental note of what is the one thing that you will do in the next 72 hours that will have the start of your next year be different to any other year. Thanks.